and welcome along. This kind of doesn't really apply what I'm about to say next for most of you in the room at the moment, but for those of you who are watching the recording or who join me a little bit later on, welcome to this little kind of working lunch. I hope you've got a cup of soup, or you've got some quinoa salad, or something or other to kind of have your lunch and learn with. And what I'm going to be sharing with you today are the 8 key insights that have come out of me having profiled now over 10,000 salespeople in the last 6.5 years. Before I get into that, though, just a couple of things. There's a bit of a promo here, a quick ad from the sponsor. 48% of first sales hires fail into small businesses, and the fact of the matter is they don't have to. And so if you click on that QR code, if you're a founder or an owner of a business, you're contemplating hiring a salesperson at some stage, I highly recommend you click on that or grab a hold of that QR code, go to the scorecard that will come up, and the scorecard is called the Sales Readiness to Hire Scorecard, and it's going to give you the ability to kind of do a little bit of a self-assessment and to discern whether or not your sales ecosystem is in fact strong enough to sustain bringing a hire on, whether it's another hire or a new hire, your first hire, whatever it may be. For those of you that are joining us who are in sales, then there's a little offer here for you perhaps to sharpen your saw, and that'll make sense based on the stuff that I share through the rest of the presentation today. So we've got a service which is available, which is what I'll describe as an elite sales coaching program. And unlike every other sales coaching program that focuses on methodology or process, this actually focuses on the behavioral piece that I'm going to talk about today. So for those of us that haven't met before, James Michael, founder and CEO, which stands for Chief Engagement Officer of Justified Talent. And at Justified Talent, we specialize in working with small business owners, generally to recruit their first salesperson. Sometimes it's their second or third because they DIY it at the first time round and they've got it wrong and they're tearing their hair out. And so they've decided to engage a professional to bring them on board. You've got some contact details there. My background originally, aside from being in the military, is in behavioral psychology. And so that's kind of informed a lot of what I've gone on to do through most of my working life. But this business I kicked off only 6.5 years ago. I'd never been an agency recruiter before. I kind of figured there was a bit of a gap in the market. I didn't think recruitment was being done particularly well. I'd been a client of recruiters as well as a candidate, and I kind of figured it wasn't kind of being done particularly well. And in particular, you know, what kind of occurred to me was recruitment seemed to be a bit of a guessing game. Right. And so the name of the business, Justified Talent, is born of the fact that I had a conversation with somebody when I was a people and culture director at Living Social. And we were posing the question as to what the recruiter that had been dealing with had done to justify their enormous fee. Right. And so the justified piece actually comes from that story. You know, I've made this claim as we go through this today that, you know, this is based on having profiled 10,000 people. Let me give you just a little bit of proof of that. That's our dashboard. This is where all of our applicants come into. That screenshot was taken yesterday morning, and you can see that, you know, we've had 10,658 people come into our database over the last 6.5 years. Every single one of them, when they apply, is asked to undertake the profiling that we do. So yeah, just want to kind of let you know that that's not a magic number that I pulled out of my backside. It's a genuine number. All right, so I'm going to suggest to you, and I think many of you will probably know this already, the recruitment crystal ball is broken, right? And the traditional selection methodology, that you know, cover letter, resume, structured interview, maybe a personality assessment, and reference checking, that, you know, that kind of 5 kind of pillars of, you know, gold standard recruitment, only gets it right in terms of identifying high performers 26% of the time. And that's a Harvard stat. And what does it result in? You can see the numbers on the screen here. 55% of sales reps in the Western world missed quota for FY24 again, right? You know, that's a fairly common standard number that we all kind of keep seeing, those of us that are in the sales space. The average tenure of salespeople right now is 17 months. right? And I'm going to suggest to you, very few people are leaving the sales role that they're in at the 16, 17, 18 month mark at the zenith of their career, excuse me. Typically, high performers tend to hang around for about 3 to 5 years, right? And so when people are jumping ship at the 18 month mark, I'm going to be rude here and kind of suggest that maybe they're jumping ship before they're being made to walk the plank. Sales rep turnover is 3 times higher than in almost any other role inside any business. Still, right? And you can see I've got still again here. Like this has been around forever and a day, and yet the way in which recruiters and the way in which a lot of founders and owners go about recruiting has not changed, right? And then the other thing we know, and I've kind of shared with you a moment ago, is that 48% of first sales hires into small businesses fail. So here's the fact, right? And I know you know this intuitively, but I don't know that there's enough emphasis placed on this by people. Selling is human, right? It's not just about the tools and the techniques and the processes and the methodologies, right? This is about human beings selling to human beings ultimately, right? And as a result of that, not every human being is hardwired to sell. And so the behavioral analytics and predictive hiring software kind of gives you the insight that you need to discern whether somebody is a good job fit or not, and whether they've got the innate hardwired characteristics to do what's demanded of them in selling, because selling is absolutely demanding. So here's the first of the 8 insights that I'm going to share with you today, right? And this is a pattern that is emerging, and it's in response to stress. So this is a proprietary tool that we have. You won't be able to access this out in the open marketplace. And what it does is it literally takes a look at when stress starts to come on in selling. And let's talk about the stress. And those of you that have come here from our LinkedIn post and invitation will have seen me referencing this. Sales is, apart from being a founder, the single most stressful job in any business. Right, we're up against tight deadlines. We're up against competition. We're getting ghosted. We're getting lied to. All manner of things. The opportunity for us to get out of bed and every single day have a whole bunch of people tell us to go take a hike is there. It's real. And even for the people who are very, very good at selling, they're always in a competitive environment, in a competitive situation. And so that stress is ever present on salespeople. Right? What you see in the green spread here is what's emerging as the pattern that we see in those folks that are high-performing salespeople. And what you're seeing in terms of what this tool is measuring is what emotional response does this person tend to lean towards as the stress comes on. At the middle of the circle here, that's when things are hunky-dory, right? And what you'll see here is that, generally speaking, they're kind of going all the way around here. They're using every one of these tools in their bag on the top half of the circle. As the circle starts to come out, what that's indicating is a higher level of stress. And initially, yes, you'll see some of the stuff that you'd probably expect in salespeople, a degree of aggression, a degree of competitive spirit, right? But at the same time, what you'll also see is them heading left and up towards the top. So they're understanding about the need to be cooperative, the need to be able to create win-win situations, also kind of taking ownership and responsibility for the outcome of the situation and the deal that they're working on. As pressure goes even harder, as we go out to the extreme here, what you see here is this competitive and competitive aggressive stuff drops off. They're no longer using that, right? And so that kind of typical view that we have that salespeople are a bull in a china shop, that they're hardwired to kind of smash through, in fact, transpires to not be the case today. That was probably the case in the 1980s, maybe even in the 1990s, when it was very much still a features and benefits kind of sell. Today, we're all hearing this. We're getting bored of hearing it in a way, but we all know that today's buyer is far more educated. They've done a lot of research before they're talking to salespeople, and so we as buyers are looking for somebody who will genuinely work in consultation with us, in partnership with us, who will sell to us in a manner which is insightful. Right. And so what we see then is this spread that goes far more over to the left-hand side of this wheel and then ultimately out here to managerial. And managerial essentially is taking charge. So that could seem as though it's about aggression, but it's not. It's about taking charge of the situation. It's about setting boundaries. It's about setting timelines and expectations with prospects, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Number 2, and this is a tool that you can access here in Australia, anywhere in the world, in fact, but it's an Australian tool. It's called the QO2. It's administered by a company called Team Management Systems in Brisbane. They operate globally. And what the QO2 is measuring, and what we're seeing huge evidence of at the moment, is that optimism and resilience are leading indicators of likelihood to be successful in sales. So the QO2 measures the quotient that the respondent focuses on opportunity versus obstacles. So opportunity, obstacles, that's the O2, and the Q being quotient. So what quotient of their focus is on opportunities versus obstacles? What you see here, this number here is 3.8. That means that this individual is 3.8 times more inclined to focus on opportunities than they are on obstacles, right? Within that, and by the way, the average in the Australian norm base at the moment, so across all functions and role types, is 2.2. So what we're seeing for those salespeople who are turning out to be top quartile consistent performers who stay with their business for 2-3 more years is they're getting a QO2 score of 3.0 and above, right? And so what you'll see here is, and this is a tool that's designed to have an understanding of what we call their motivational intensity. So it's having a look at the psychology, not necessarily the actions that they're taking, but one leads to the other. But what's their psychology? What's their thinking? So how much energy will they expend in moving towards goals? Right. And so you'll see this person scored 100%. But again, what we're finding with the top performers is typically that number there is at least 80% and above. This one's really, really important, multi-pathways, and it's the degree to which that person is psychologically prepared to push through when obstacles come up, right? So will they go under? Will they go around? Will they go over? What level of energy and exertion are they psychologically prepared to put into overcoming those challenges? And again, we're kind of seeing the top performers typically are sitting 80% and above, right? Now, the thing about this tool and what it's measuring, I'll share with you, it's measuring a state as opposed to a trait, right? So you'll see from here forward, I'm going to be talking about hardwired traits, but this is a state of mind. And so the exciting thing about a state of mind is it's learned, right? And this is actually born of Martin Seligman's work. So if you're familiar with learned optimism, if you're familiar with the notion of positive psychology, he's claimed, seen as the founding father of all of that. And so, what we're seeing here is, this kind of psychological kind of focus on preparing to go above or around or over. The time focus one is interesting because, and what it's measuring here is the degree of focus on either the past or the present or the future. And what we're finding for most of the top performers is they have a present day and future focus. They're less interested in the past. They're probably appreciative of certain precedents that might be useful to them, but only whilst they consider them to be useful, right? And so they're very, very focused on the here and now. Where's my current deal at? Where are my current opportunities? What does my pipeline actually look like? But there's also this future focus. And in particular, what we find with this, because in concert with this optimism, is they tend to have an optimistic view of what their future holds. Right. The one counterbalance, which is really, really interesting, is this fault finding. And we find that if I go to the underperformers for a moment, their fault finding score tends to be quite low. So they're down in the 15s, the 10s, the 8s, right? They wear rose-colored glasses. And as a consequence of that, they are blindsided when things go wrong, when that deal drops out of the pipeline, when the customer starts to ghost them and all that kind of thing. They're taken by surprise by that, because they don't have a lens on that says, where could this go wrong? Where is this going to fall out? Who have I not spoken to? Who's not telling me the truth, right? Whereas we find with the top performers, their fault finding score typically is around 25 to maybe 30%. Now, you don't want to go much higher than that because now you've become a miserable old goat. And you're probably always looking for where things can go wrong, which you don't want in a salesperson. But the optimal number seems to be between 25 and 30%. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3, What I'm going to share with you here and from here for the rest of the slides are the outcomes of having profiled then eventually the people who make it to our finalist list. And so that's over certainly, and I did this before I started Justified. And so, we've probably got now about 8 years worth of data here. We're probably talking about 3,000 salespeople. We profile them using a tool, which again is available to you if you want to use it. It comes out of the US from a mob called Profiles International. Here in Australia, that's distributed by a company called Peoplelogica. I've been using this tool now for 25 years. I use it partly because I'm a snob when it comes to these kinds of tools. If I have another founder tell me that they want to hire DI as their salesperson, I'm going to probably scream and suggest that maybe you go get a Capricorn with an Aries rising instead. But what this tool and the reason I use this tool is all about is because it is the single most predictively reliable instrument of its kind, right? And I'll go a bit of kind of psych babble, speak for the moment for the nerds in the room, the fellow nerds like me. When you look at a tool like DISC or Myers-Briggs, the predictive reliability of those tools sit around 0.47 or 0.52, where the ideal number is 1. This particular tool, the Profile Sales Assessment, which has an engine behind it called Profile XT, rates at 0.87. And there are no other tools on the planet at the moment that have as high a predictive reliability. Why can't we get to 1? Well, because we're talking about humans, right? And humans are not precise, perfect instruments. The ones and zeros thing doesn't work with us. So we can't nail us absolutely perfectly, but this tool gets it right. And the other thing about this tool is that it has what's called, again, a little bit of nerd talk here, but retest norms of 0.95, which means that if I test you today and I test you again in 3 years' time, the results will have a 0.95 correlation to the previous version. Whereas if I do a DISC, I can be a high DI tomorrow and I can be a high SC the day after. If I choose to be, I can manipulate it. So what's come out of that? And here are the key things out of all of the things that it measures. It measures 15 factors. I'm not going to share all 15 with you today. I'm going to share with you the things that are absolutely transpiring to be part and parcel of what it takes to be a high-performing solution selling B2B, salesperson. So the capacity for learning, right? So this tool subscribes to bell curve theory. 68% of the population would generally land on either 4, 5, 6, or 7, right? And so what you see here is the capacity for learning of top quartile sales performers is slightly above the average, right? At the risk of being rude here, 50% of the population will be dumber than your top quartile salesperson. And I don't say that in a judgmental way. They won't have the same capacity for learning. And so this capacity for learning is slightly above the general population. Is it, PhD level? No, it's not. So there will be 7% of the population who are actually smarter than the top quartile performers, right? But of the kind of 3,500 odd people that we've profiled who've been top performers and have gone on to continue being top performers, they all land in that 6, 7, 8 zone. The importance of that can't be kind of understated because, as I said a moment ago, we've now moved well past the features and benefits style of selling. It's not enough just to know your product and to be able to do the kind of brochure flog. Today, you need to know your ICP. You need to understand their challenges. You need to understand their world. You need to understand what their future does or doesn't look like. There's a depth of understanding that we need to have today as salespeople, which is well beyond what it was in the 1980s and the 1990s. Add into that then the use of technology. A simple thing like this, setting this up on LinkedIn, getting here on Zoom, being able to get the PowerPoint to play. We're all getting very, very used to that. It's kind of norm now. But the fact of the matter is we're being asked to do more with the noggin today than we were probably 20 years ago. And so, if you don't have somebody in your fold who's got a reasonably above average intellect, you're going to have a challenge from them. This one probably won't come in as a great surprise, and it's verbal skill. And so the verbal skill scores are in the same zone, right? So they'll have a verbal skill which is greater than 50% of the population. 7% of the population will be able to kind of out-talk them simply through their command of language, et cetera, et cetera. But their ability to articulate right, in concert with the overall intellect piece is really, really important today, right? That will translate sometimes also into the written proposals. And so this capacity to be able to take sometimes quite complex concepts and distill those down into something simple, bite-sized, chewable, actually requires intellect, and it requires a good understanding of language and all that kind of thing. So we're seeing the top performers certainly, again, above average in terms of verbal skill. So now we've got the motivational intensity piece. In the tool, this is actually called energy. It's actually measuring drive, right? And what I'm going to suggest to you, I'm going to go to the other side for a moment. And, you can see the 3 bars are in exactly the same place as the previous. So the top quartile performers either kind of land on 6, 7, or 8, right? If I go to the folks that are down at 2 or 3, right, typically what we find with them is they quit more readily than anybody else, right? So the people who have a motivational intensity, a level of goal orientation, a desire to do better in their lives, they're up in the 6, 7, 8. The folks who are happy with the status quo, the folks who don't have particularly strong drive or a desire to improve their lifestyle, typically land at 2 and 3. And when they come up against obstacles, they're the ones that will quit, right? We did do some counter study, and when we've taken a look at people who have consistently left at around the 18-month mark, what we tend to find is their motivational intensity scores sit around 3, 4, 5. All right, so they've had a desire, they wanted to get into sales, they know that sales is a good way to earn a coin, but that hardwired nature that lives within them is not quite strong enough to help them push through the adversity that comes with sales. Okay, this one might come as a surprise. Sociability, right? And for those of you, again, that were kind of seeing me posting leading up to this, one of the clues that I shared with you in there was good quality salespeople are not extroverts, right? There's that enduring myth that a good salesperson is the life of the party. They're the big sociable individual. They can talk underwater with a mouthful of marbles, all that kind of thing. They're out there socializing, eating and drinking for Australia. Yeah, no. Right. As it turns out, the top quality salespeople, the top quartile salespeople in B2B solution selling are what's called ambiverts. So on this scale, on the left-hand side, you've got your introvert lot. On the right-hand side, you've got your extroverted lot. What you see here is they're erring slightly towards the left, right? And so they're ambiverts. And so what we find with these folks is that, yes, they will get out there and they will socialize, but they're not socializing for socializing's sake. They're not in need of good company. They're not in need of conversation. They're doing it because they know it's part of the job. If you're not having conversations with people, you're not going to be making sales. And so, they will do that. But the moment they don't need to do it anymore, they will stop, right? And they'll come back and they won't go and hide in their cave. Unlike me, I'm actually deeply introverted. And so, when I finish having this chat with you folks today, even though none of you are chatting with me, and that's okay, I'm going to go and hide and never talk to another human being again for the rest of the day, right? These folks don't need to do that, right? So and the interesting thing then about the sociability piece, and again, this won't come as a great surprise when you kind of think about it, being an ambivert means these folks are better at listening than extroverts are. And if there's one key thing you need to be good at today, particularly in discovery, is yes, asking great questions, but not listening to respond, listening to understand, right? And the folks who are extremely extroverted have great difficulty doing that. They feel the need to socialize the thought that's in their head. And so they tend to kind of ride roughshod over whoever else is in the meeting, okay? And they feel the need to kind of fill the void with noise. The ambivert is somebody who will ask good probing questions. They'll do it with a level of curiosity, and I'm going to be referring to curiosity again in a moment. And then they'll shut up and they'll listen with an intent to understand. All right, manageability. One part of this will not be a surprise to you. Salespeople are unmanageable, right? They're a bunch of rogues, right? 1s and 2s we call rule breakers. 3s and 4s we call rule benders. Top quartile sales performers in B2B solution selling consistently keep landing on 3, 4, 5, right? So that makes them in some ways, probably seeming as though they're unmanageable. What it actually means, though, is that these folks are curious, right? They don't accept the status quo. They don't accept things just because it's been said. And I don't mean just internally, I mean externally. So when they're with prospects, they don't accept what the prospect says at surface value or even at face value. They'll dig deeper. They'll dig deeper to get a deeper understanding, right? Because they're curious. They're naturally curious. So if I go back to that one, the sociability piece, really good at asking questions and shutting up and listening because they're curious and they want to challenge, right? And so, a little while ago, of course, the challenger salesperson was all the rage that everybody was kind of banging on about and building their new consulting firm around. But the challenger salesperson comes out of this kind of lower manageability piece. And so, yeah, sure, that can be a challenge for you as a sales manager or as a business owner, having this person who might on occasions be defiant and unruly. But I'm going to encourage you to kind of run with that, because when you're seeing that in evidence, you're actually seeing somebody who's probably going to be really, really good at using curiosity. Yeah. Okay. Here's another interesting one, and this is in a way counterintuitive, but I'll explain that. So this is number 8. We're almost there. Attitude, and this isn't measuring bad attitude or good attitude. It's actually measuring what the person's attitude is to the opportunity in their pipeline, or their attitude towards this sale, or their attitude towards the prospect. On the left-hand side, we measure on pessimism, and on the right-hand side, we measure optimism. So this will seem counterintuitive, because in the QO2, I was telling you that we're looking for people with high levels of optimism. The thing about the QO2 and what it's measuring in terms of optimism is my optimism about my life, my optimism about my circumstances going forward, and what my future looks like. The attitude that this tool is measuring, the profile sales assessment, is what's your attitude towards the prospect, right? So with 3, 4, 5, they've got a more pessimistic attitude than 50% of the population. Right, so the folks over on the right-hand side of the scale, they're in la la land. They're wearing rose-colored glasses. Life is Pollyanna. Some of you will probably be familiar with that old sales saying, and that is that the amateur salesperson is the one who knows for sure, without a shadow of a doubt, that they've got this one in the bag right up to the moment they lose it. Right? Because they're not asking the right kinds of questions. They're not asking, who else is involved in this decision-making process. They're not asking who owns budget. They're not asking whether or not there's, a burning reason to go ahead and do business today, or is this just a nice exploration, et cetera, et cetera. These folks, the top quartile performers, are all very, 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 very good at doing that. They do not accept at face value what it is that they're being told by their prospects. They will dig deeper and deeper and deeper. Now, they don't do that in a horrible way. They don't do it in a confronting way, but they're just not easily fooled. They're not going to have the wool pulled over their eyes. So that's the 8, but wait, there's a bonus. This one, again, might come as a surprise, right? So I said I'd give you 8. Here's 9. This one's for free. Customer centricity, not. Right? So in the tool, the label that's being measured here is something called accommodation. So we're asking, how naturally hardwired are you to accommodate the needs of others? If you look at somebody who's a 9 or a 10, to give you an example, a 9 or 10 in accommodating is somebody who will ask permission to ask permission. Okay? What we see here with the top quartile sales performers is that their customer centricity is, to the left of center, and only 7% of the population would be any less customer centric than they are. 50% of the population would be more customer centric than they are. What does that mean? It means they're really good at standing their ground. Right? They're really good at not giving away margin. They're really good at setting expectations, putting down timelines and things of that nature. They're very, very good at striking the balance to make sure that, that they're doing well in the deal as well as the customer doing well in the deal. Now, are they being completely and utterly obstinate? No, they're not. But they're not somebody who will fawn and trip over themselves to try and please and delight the customer. Okay, so that's our 9. I will just kind of almost finish. I'm going to go to the Q&A in a moment, but will finish with this. One of the things that I have heard over the years, whenever I've gone about suggesting to employers that we profile and at Justify Talent, you know, that's what we do, and we won't err from that. Anybody who engages us is engaging us because of the fact that we're not interested in resumes, we're not interested in cover letters. You know, what we're going to be doing is doing deep dive into the data to get an understanding of the hardwired nature of the individual. But what I find from a lot of people who complain or push back on profiling their people is, yeah, but it always boxes people. It puts them, they're a blue or they're a green or they're a J or they're a D, or, it boxes people too much. Mathematically, the tool that I've kind of spent most of the time sharing with you, the profile sales assessment with the bar charts there, as you've seen, there's a scale of 1 to 10. The benchmark typically allows for movement across 3 of the 10, across 8 stems. That actually means, if you do the maths, and I didn't do this, ChatGPT did it for me, I'm a mathematical moron, but ChatGPT tells me that because of all of the variations that are available within the benchmark, there's 134,217,728 different kinds of people that could rock up for the job and fit into the benchmark and do it well. So I want to kind of knock on the head the idea that, if we're profiling people, we're putting them into boxes. I guess it depends on the tool that you're using. But yeah. Alrighty. Thank you. I'm going to drop out of the show piece and see if I can see you all. Anybody got any questions, any comments, any concerns?
Hi, James. I have
Hey,
a
Phil.
question for you. With wonderful information, thank you. I'm talking about these very human elements and characteristics and behaviours. So my question for you is how do you see the development of AI either helping or hindering these top performers in the coming years?
Great question. Look, I think, and I'll be more than welcome for other people to make a contribution to this answer. From my perspective, I think, AI is here. There's no point us living in denial about that fact. The clever use of AI kind of reinforces the fact that people are going to need to have a level of intellectual capacity to actually use it to benefit. But yeah, it's a very, very powerful tool. I mean, I shared an example with Mark McInnes, who's in the audience today, only yesterday, and with Aditi, who works with me, about a little exercise that I did yesterday where I got ChatGPT to give me some deep insights into where a particular sector is going in the tech space. And I use those insights in an email to a prospect, right? Being able to do that and being able to get really good quality understanding and information of what's going on in your prospect's world, just as one example, is a wonderful thing to do. The bit that I don't particularly like about, some use of AI, of course, is where we're using it to replace us, to allow us to be lazy. But yeah, I mean, the use case for AI is enormous, I think.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks, mate. Any other questions? I can see some stuff in chat here.
Yeah, I've got a story to tell, if I may.
Yeah, go.
So when I know Mark Perbrick from PeopleLogica from experience. So I was running the team at Mathletics, and we had 12 salespeople out in schools, and we were looking to appoint a sales manager. And obviously, the cardinal sin is don't appoint your top salesperson to be sales manager because they're different skill sets and different traits and attributes.
Yeah.
So I got Mark in because I've been referred to him to look at this tool that James has been sharing. So these 8 markers. So with a conversation with Mark, we went through. I described what I want, and obviously he's experienced as well. We came up with the profile. We came up with those markers 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever they were for this role. And we came up with our ideal profile that we were looking for the sales manager. And we thought, okay, let's run the existing salespeople, so it's 12 people, through the profiling. So I had a ranking of salespeople 1 down to 12 in terms of performance and my satisfaction with them from a corporate point of view. And the correlation between in terms of the closeness to the ideal profile when we ran all 12 salespeople through was almost identical. They came up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. So 1 was closest to the ideal profile, and the 12th salesperson was 12th closest or furthest away from the ideal profile. So that gave me good information on which to make the decision. I actually promoted this top salesperson to the sales manager because she was the ideal profile for a sales manager. And I actually moved on the bottom quartile of salespeople because they were not the type of people that we wanted to do the job. They were hardworking, and I put a lot of effort into them, but their makeup was just wrong for the job. So
yeah, so let me grab a hold of that, Andrew. It's a great example. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right, and I'm going to grab that last sentence. You put a lot of effort into them, and yet the makeup wasn't right. So there's a saying, and I know you've heard me use this saying many times, but there's a saying that I use, and that is, it really doesn't matter how much training you give to a donkey. It's never going to win the Melbourne Cup.
Yeah.
Right? It eats what a horse eats. It kind of runs in a way like a horse runs. It dumps out the back what a horse dumps. Really, really wants to be a horse. Not going to happen.
So
right?
what I wished
it
it
just
happened
doesn't
is
have
that
the
we
makeup.
profiled when we were hiring these people in the first place, not after the fact. But anyway, what I'm saying is that this tool works. This idea of profiling and getting the inside information on people rather than the resume and the interview and all the stuff that you talk about all of the time, James.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Thank you. Bronwyn, I know you asked a question about does the profiling only work for sales roles? The deeper profiles, so the Profile XT that I was sharing with you, it can actually be applied to every single role of any kind. The tool that we use is a sales subset version of it called the Profile Sales Assessment, but the Profile XT, which is the engine that sits behind it, can actually be used to create benchmarks for almost any role, well, not almost, for any role. Okay, any other questions?
Yes, James. Bronwyn here again.
Hey, Bron.
So each of those characteristics equally important, or do you put more weight on one of them or two of them, or
Glad you asked that question.
How do you balance that out?
Yeah, cool. So I'm going to share with you the single most important factor that we are finding that predicts success or failure are the energy drivers. So if I go to, was it that one? Yep, motivational intensity. So that, move this out of the way. So the motivational intensity piece, right? As soon as I start seeing people hanging around the 3, 4, 5, I know that they're going to struggle. Conversely, when we go 9, 10, we've got to be careful with that, although, and Phil's in the room and he's in the real estate space, so he'll have a giggle at this. High-performing real estate salespeople are all 9s and 10s, right? The folks who are selling 30, 40, 50, 60 houses a year are all 9, 10 for the motivational intensity. When you're in the kind of B2B solution selling space, though, that level of intensity can mean you come across as being a goal-seeking missile. And the problem with that is sometimes that can cause collateral damage on the way through, right? But yeah, Bronwyn, to answer your question, that's the single most significant driver that we're seeing. And again, if I come to the QO2 tool, so just moving towards goals energy, the psychological preparedness to deal with rejection and setbacks and failure and competition, et cetera, they're the two predominant. The rest of them have a high level of importance because what I've shown you here in sharing these slides, right? So I've kind of shown you 8 from the PSA. That's 8 of 15. They're the 8 that really are important. Okay, just conscious that it's
sorry. One last question, James. Just very
Yes,
quickly, the ability to coach and manage people from this. I'm guessing there are some fairly good advantages in knowing where they sit in different categories.
Yeah, 100%, right? I mean, in many respects, and with each of the clients that we recruit for, they end up getting a very, very kind of deep document on each of their individuals, which plots where they've landed versus where the benchmark is. And as a consequence, they get coaching guidance. That's typically about 36 pages long. And the way I describe it to our customers is, think of this as being your user's manual on the new human being that you've just purchased or you're renting. So it's very, very powerful. And one of the things we get lots and lots of feedback on is that the customers are always, or our clients are always telling us, that report, particularly when they're kind of 2 or 3 or 4 months in, that report has told me so much more in these early months that would ordinarily have probably taken me a year or 2 to find out. Very, very powerful. All right, look, I'm conscious of time. It's 13:02, so I'm over time. I'm annoyed with myself for that. But before I go, quick word from the sponsor. If you're a founder in a business, or even a sales manager in a business, and you're thinking of hiring a salesperson, I very much encourage you to grab a hold of that QR code, go to our sales readiness to hire scorecard. It's just 16 questions across 4 areas that will help you discern whether or not your sales ecosystem is strong enough to actually support a sales hire or not. If you're a salesperson and what you've seen today kind of tickles your fancy and you're interested to know, where do I sit? How can I improve? How can I sharpen my saw? Grab a hold of that QR code there. That's going to take you to our website where you'll be introduced to one of our coaching programs. And all right, there you are. Definitely telling me to shut up and get off.
And James, before you get away, if I may.
Yes, Clive.
I ran into profiling tools, I think, in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
For anybody that's out there who is employing people or thinking of employing people, get on it, because they've got better. They were pretty good back then, but they've got better. And before you run a person through it, put yourself through it.
Yes.
Figure out who the hell you are, because you might not get on with the right person. You might have to move yourself out of the business and put a manager in.
Indeed.
Good point.
So thank you, James. That was a good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Clive. Folks, thanks so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. I hope you found it insightful. I am obviously, we've been recording this, so we're going to put a copy of this up on our YouTube channel. So if anybody wants to revisit, please feel free to do that. We'll let you know when it comes out. And if you want to have any kind of conversation about anything you've heard today, again, feel free to make contact with me, and I'd be more than happy to have that conversation. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, James.
Thank you. Thanks, James.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.